Everybody, welcome to
Hello.
Britpops React. Today we're looking back at the Falklands War. Yeah, it's sort of all
Las
come to an
Malvinas.
end. Yeah, back when 1982, the year I was born. Yeah, this is Mini Wars, #1, brought to you by Oversimplified. We've done Oversimplified before.
Yes,
like the way
yeah.
they do their videos, so very, very clever. We're doing this one because BP2.
Because our lovely friend Japcar84 popped along and asked us to check this one out. Bought us a coffee so that we can sit back, relax, and check it out. Yes, 1982. Yes, I was already joined the army then, junior army, 16 in 1981. But I was still going through training, so nothing to do with me, mate.
No. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into this one. We always like these types of videos, historical videos. So if you do too, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Do come with us at Britpops React.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
Hi, English Mariner John Strong. Hi, Anthony Carey, 5th Viscount of Falkland. I would very much like for you to go to Chile and locate the wreck of a Spanish treasure ship for me. Okay. Hey, I found some islands.
All right. Yeah.
The English were probably not the first to discover the Falklands, but they were the first to write it down. They found it to be cold, wet, and miserable, just like home. So they established a colony in 1765, unaware that the French had also discovered the islands and done the same a year earlier. And for a while the two were unaware of each other's existence, until presumably there was an awkward moment where they ran into each other. Then the Spanish showed up and told the French that a couple hundred years earlier the Pope drew a line on a map and said all of this belongs to Portugal and all of this belongs to Spain, and that the island was in Spain's territory and they would like the French to hand over their settlement. Now, since the two were good friends and Spain was willing to pay in cash money, the French obliged. But since they were still a little bitter about the recent 7 Years' War thing, they made sure to warn the Spanish not to let those dirty English on the other side of the island take over. So Spain went over to the English and explained, Pope, line on map, Spain's island. And the English said, yeah, right, this is our island. But the Spanish had more guns, so they kicked them off anyway. But then England threatened to go to war. So Spain went to their friends in France and said, hey, it looks like stuff is about to go down. You in on this? And the French Minister of War said, yeah, and we'll launch a full-scale invasion of England and party like it's 1066. But then King Louis XV said, 1, you're insane, and 2, you're fired. Sorry, Spain, we're not ready for a war right now. So Spain had to give the English their settlement back, saying it's still our island, and the English said, no, it's our island. Then some colonists in North America got a bit rowdy, so the English had to leave their settlement to go focus on that. But they left behind a plaque that said this is totally still our island. So the island was in Spanish hands, but then a French guy, no, not that one, turned on the Spanish, took over most of the country, and captured King Ferdinand VII. And in response, the Spanish colonies in South America started vying for independence. So Spain had a little bit on its hands and also had to leave the islands. And for a couple decades, the islands were left uninhabited except for the penguins, some fishermen, and the gauchos, which are basically like cowboys but cooler and Spanisher. A merchant from Hamburg living in the now independent United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata heard about the feral cattle roaming the Falklands and thought it would be a good way to make some money. So he got permission from both Buenos Aires and the British government to set up trade there as a private venture. Some American ships came down and began hunting whales and seals around the islands, and Verney wasn't too happy about it. So he asked Buenos Aires for some military assistance in defending the islands, but Buenos Aires said, meh, do it yourself, gave him some weapons, and appointed him governor of the islands. So he seized the US ships and arrested their crews. In response, two things happened. First, America came down and said, nice settlement you have there, would be a shame if someone destroyed it. And then they destroyed it. Second, Britain heard Verney had been appointed governor, meaning the United Provinces, actually now the Argentine Confederation, were officially claiming the islands as theirs. So Britain showed up and said, hey, didn't you see our plaque? And since they had more guns, they kicked them off the island. And the Falklands remained firmly in British hands for the next century. They officially became a crown colony in 1840. Port Stanley became the island's capital in 1845. The cattle hides from the island weren't worth much, so they imported sheep from Britain in 1851. 2 world wars came and went, and all this time the Argentinians never rescinded their claim over the islands. Now it's 1976, and after a couple civil wars, a new brutal military dictatorship sponsored by the US fight against communism has taken control in Argentina. And by 1981, this guy was in power. The economy had been struggling for a long time, and Galtieri had been unable to improve the situation. Now, if you ever find yourself the brutal military leader of a struggling South American country and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the centuries. Start a war to distract everyone from their misery. Galtieri knew how popular he would be if he could finally take back Argentina's Las Malvinas from the occupying British. There had been proposals to cut British military spending, and the ice patrol vessel HMS Endurance had been withdrawn from the area. So the Argentinians assumed the British may not even bother doing anything about the invasion. After easily capturing the largely uninhabited South Georgia island, 600 Argentine troops were sent to the Falklands. The small number of Royal Marines and other British forces stationed there put up a small amount of resistance, but in the end had to surrender to the larger Argentine force. Crowds in Argentina celebrated the news, but they were wrong to assume the British would do nothing, because the person in charge of the United Kingdom at the time was this lady.
Maggie.
Thatcher was a somewhat controversial prime minister, but whether you loved her or hated her, there was no denying that she was tough. Like metal. Iron, for example. She immediately declared an exclusion zone around the islands and organized for a task force of over 100 ships to set sail for the Falklands. The United Nations expressed concern at the Argentine invasion. All South American nations apart from Chile backed Argentina. And since the United States had propped up the Argentine dictatorship, Reagan went to Thatcher and said, "Could you maybe just let them have the islands?" And Thatcher said no.
No.
Okay, here, have some weapons. Fighting a war over 8,000 miles from home was a logistical challenge for the British. They requisitioned civilian cruise ships and containers, and they used British-owned Ascension Island as a forward base. By the time they arrived at the Falklands in May, the Argentine forces had had time to entrench themselves. The first task for the British was to gain control of the seas, which they did easily. On the 2nd of May, a British submarine sank an Argentine cruiser. The sinking was controversial, as it occurred outside the British exclusion zone. It was also the largest loss of life in a single incident during the war. And in response, the Argentine Navy withdrew from the islands. The next task for the British was to gain air superiority. While the Argentine Air Force controlled the skies, they were able to inflict considerable damage on the Royal Navy below. Days after the sinking of the General Belgrano, 2 Argentine super-étendards carried out a raid on the HMS Sheffield and sank it with an Exocet missile. For weeks, the Argentine Air Force would continue to carry out raids and inflict heavy casualties on the Royal Navy, with British Sea Harriers doing their best to take out as many of the Argentine aircraft as they could. While the battle in the skies raged on, San Carlos was chosen as the best landing site for the British ground forces. An SAS raid took out Argentine defenses on Pebble Island, and the HMS Alacrity sailed through Falkland Sound to flush out any Argentine supply ships. The landings began on May 21st, with Argentine aircraft carrying out full-scale raids on the task force ships taking part in the landing, damaging several and sinking a few. But anti-aircraft cannons and Sea Harriers shot down many of the aircraft in what became a major turning point for air superiority, and a beachhead was successfully formed. Then the ground troops began their movements out of San Carlos, across the north towards Stanley, and south toward the Argentine stronghold at Goose Green. In the following battles, a clear trend emerged. The Argentine conscripts put up a good fight, and with the rough, muddy terrain, the war was by no means easy for the British. But with highly skilled Royal Marine commanders and parachute regiment troops, the British would often find themselves taking on larger numbers of Argentinian soldiers, but would still come out victorious with minimal casualties. The 14-hour-long battle for Goose Green commenced on the night of May 28th. The battle ended in a decisive British victory, with over 900 Argentinians surrendering. Then, with 5,000 reinforcements arriving from the 5th Infantry Brigade, the British started preparing for their final assault on Stanley. In a series of hard-fought battles, they took control of the hills and mountains surrounding the town, as the Argentine forces withdrew, with British ships shelling their positions from offshore. Utterly surrounded, on the 14th of June, the Argentinians surrendered, and the war was over. The 2-month-long war claimed hundreds of lives, and left the islands strewn with minefields that still pose a problem to this day. Argentina still claims the islands, but in 2013 a referendum was held, and the islanders voted 99.8% in favor of remaining free. Plus, oil was just found near the islands, so the British probably aren't going to give them up anytime soon.
No. There you go. I like that. It was a good video because being the history. It's like not. We've talked about this before about British schools and stuff. We get taught all sorts of rubbish in schools, but we never get taught like our own history. And I never knew anything about the Falkland Islands until I was way into my teens and sort of stumbled upon it myself, really. So yeah, it's an interesting video. Sort of fills some holes in about the places where we actually did strike, and down to our Royal Marines, who are extremely well trained, drilled. So yeah. It was a good video. I like that one. It was a good one, Jap Carl.
Yeah, I like the initial history, how sort of France and Britain came to sort of find it in the first place.
Yes, didn't know any of that.
And the wrangling that went on prior to that. I mean, he did leave out the Operation Black Buck raid for the Vulcan bombers that flew down and bombed the airfield in Port Stanley. I mean, that was massive at the time, the Vulcan bombers took off from the UK flew all the way down there.
Amazing.
Watched a documentary on that. They were sort of flying on fumes in the end to get back home. So very interesting. Cheers, Japcar. Yeah, I spent a couple of months out on Mount Alice down there in 1986.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was down there for 6 months in 1986, stationed up on Mount Alice. Not much there, mate.
No.
Nope, nothing
What'd
at all.
you get up to up there?
We were on air defence, making sure that the no aircraft tried to come back in or anything like that. So air defence operation.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think we were one of the first. By then they'd completed the airport down there, so we were one of the first to be deployed down on commercial airlines. So. Prior to that, it was all sort of big Hercules flying in.
Yeah.
So we refueled down on the Ascension Islands and then down onto the Falklands. But yes, but again, like I say, it's a British colony. You got British people there that you got to defend. So that's probably obviously why it wasn't just handed over, even though there's not a lot there.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right, shout out to Japcar. Yeah, good job, mate. Always interested when you send us over some historical videos, so that was a good one. Well spotted. We will be back tomorrow for another reaction on the channel. All sorts on the channel, and all sorts that you can help us guide the channel on where we go and what we react to. So make sure you head over to buymeacoffee.com/BritPopsReact. YouTube, subscribe, and just come with us for the journey. All right, mate. We'll be back tomorrow.
Nicely done.
Ciao, Bella, from me.
Adios, muchachos, from him.
That's the one.